Hey kids, howdy, and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. Zoe and I are here with you on June 30th. Tomorrow will be July, and this, is the hot month of the year. The hot summer starts this month. In fact, I want to remind you guys that because it is, as of tomorrow, the first week of the month, this Thursday is my global healing meditation for the month, 7 p.m. Pacific time in my Zoom space. It's completely free. I will talk all about July in sort of one presentation, and we do a little meditation at the end for those who stay for that. I love doing the global healing meditations. I've been doing them since the pandemic, and this would be one of those months where I will say in my email, and I'll say to you listeners, you don't want to miss this month because this really is the beginning of the difficult times that we're going to be visiting this summer and revisiting next year. So check in with me on Thursday and hear all about it. I actually going to cover two questions today because Sylvie wrote me, and I can answer that very quickly, and then I've got another question about the anoretic degree. So Sylvia writes, is there anything in this hot summer that you've referred to often that would indicate a large number of people transitioning? It seems everywhere I look lately, so many people are passing away. Thank you in advance, Sylvie. This is actually a pretty simple question to answer because the simple short answer is, well, no, because people transition every moment. That doesn't ebb and flow. What Sylvie's experiencing is in her world. Mm-hmm. There is an awareness of passings, even if those passings are people she doesn't know. There isn't a death transit because, I'll say it this way, Pluto, the planet of death, he exists. So death is. So it's not like there's an alignment that makes more passing or more death happen. But we as individuals with a natal chart will pass through cycles where we are experiencing at the individual level more deaths, more passings that might have Sylvie saying this or asking this. But again, the simple answer is not globally, but maybe personally. Your chart is reflecting the experience of facing death. So Lee writes in with another question that I think I can answer fairly simply, so that's why I'm putting two today. This is from Lee. Lee writes, Dr. Michael and Zoe, with an exclamation point. Zoe, you get an exclamation point. Mm-hmm. In past episodes, you've discussed how meaningful it is for a planet to pass through the 29th or anoretic degree. It's actually be the 30th. The 29th degree is actually 28 degrees in a couple of minutes. The 30th degree, this is syntax, not astrology, kids, but the detail makes me a little nuts. Through the 30th or anoretic degree of a sign. I'm curious if there's any significance when a house begins on the 29th degree of a sign and how that affects planets and luminaries in that sign. They give an example, but I'm going to sort of cut to the chase with the answer because, again, the answer is no, and here's why. The principle of the anoretic degree is a function of movement and evolution, right? So the idea is that there's these 12 sections of 30 degrees in the cosmos. We divide it up, and each 30 degrees is a sign. And so movement of a body, which implies consciousness moving, within the lens of the sign that it's in, when that moving body that has a consciousness that we knowledge, gets to the anoretic degree, the 30th degree, the last degree, 29 degrees in any minutes. That moving body is imbued with the quality of the sign that it's in and the mastery of the first 29 degrees. So that's the power of the anoretic degree. But it can't exist as powerful unless it's a moving body that's experiencing the consciousness of the mansion from beginning to end. In Placidus' house system, which is what most Western astrologers use, and I use, I don't know why Hellenistic astrology is making a big comeback, but I don't know why, and I'll be dead before it takes over. Maybe it'll take a big resurgence. But Placidus is very exact. By knowing what's at the rising sign, the ascendant, that calculates its opposite, the descendant, and Placidus' system at the same time calculates like the true midheaven, what turns out to be the top of your chart. So once you have these four angles, they are subdivided by a certain mathematical equation into each quarter becomes 3 sections. 3 times 4 is 12, and contrary to a moving body, a house placement is not organic. Like the planets are really moving in space, so they exist in an organic way, and we know that as they move, we pay attention to their path through a sign and call it anoretic, but the house structure is a human idea flatly stuck on top of the three-dimensional idea of the planets moving that we use to understand it better, but there's no organicity in space if your 5th house is ruled by the 30th degree of Leo. Because it's artificial, slapped on top. And so,
and space is multidimensional.
Right. It's like when someone says, my 7th house is empty. Does that mean I'll never have a relationship? And it's like, there's no such thing as empty because it's 3-dimensional. And we are limited when we slap a 2-dimensional viewing on a 3-dimensional experience. But that's where the interpretation of the astrologer comes in, because the interpretation transcends both the planetary's practical movement and the artificial map that the chart is. Now, it's not a terribly complicated week. In other words, I won't have a lot to talk about today. It'll be a shorter episode, but it's juicy. Partly because on Monday of next week, that's the day that Uranus changes signs and moves into Gemini. And that's an explosion, right? That's the lightning flash and sudden experiences that Uranus brings. Just moving into a new sign, and that brings a kind of instability and shocking new energy in and of itself. But it's also an air sign, which will interact with Neptune and Saturn in the fire sign of Aries. And when you mix fire and air, you get more combustion. So because that's building all week, we're going to feel that anticipation. Partly why I answered the question about the anoretic houses is because Uranus is at the anoretic degree of Taurus. He moves so slow, he's been there a while. But you understand, there's power in all week that the planet of sudden and unexpected changes and revolutionary shifts is at the mastery degree of the loving, grounded, Venus-ruled mansion of Taurus. One of the reasons why we're going to feel this so directly, and why I'm talking about it now, even though it's a next week thing, is Venus is in Taurus as well. Home in one of her ruling signs. I like to say this is the sign that Venus rules, where it's kind of nice to be here on Earth in a body. Taurus, invented the Earth, and Venus in Taurus says, yummy for being sensually, in an experience that has a loveliness, in it and to it. But Venus is inching towards a conjunction with Uranus at this powerful 30th degree on Thursday, July 3rd. Now, Venus and Uranus will get together, every year and a half or so because of Venus's, fast orbit. And anytime they get together, there's excitement in the heart. Uranus excites everything. He, wakes everything up. And in the world of, human division between good and bad, Uranus doesn't know from that. Uranus, will wake you up, whether it's to win you the lottery or push your house into a sinkhole. Either way, you're going to wake up. So when Venus and Uranus get together, we become more adept at sudden change. Our hearts align with the idea that sometimes things happen very, very suddenly and can knock us off balance. In fact, one might say that by Venus and Uranus coming together at the 30th degree of Taurus on the 3rd, that we are in our heart center sort of being prepared for the radical shift that exists between Taurus and Gemini. Like Venus will lead the way by moving into Gemini on the 4th. And so our heart gets a little hint of what it's like to move from stable, solid, fixed earth to mutable air where the air is going to light on fire. I like the idea that we get a sense of grounding on Thursday the 3rd. Now, that's the day of my global healing meditation. So I'm kind of loving that as well because not everybody comes live. Maybe 150 people come live and another 1,200 watch the recording. But I do it on the 3rd. And so we're going to meet while this heart-centered openness is preparing the way for emotional instability that we must grapple with as we move through a summer where we're getting a hint at the instability and fast change that will make 2026 a year to remember. It's not a bad idea to treat Thursday as a kind of sacred day to stop, pause, and lean into your body and your heart and your mind in a kind of ritualized way in preparation for the fast changes to come. So a mantra might be, something like, though we move through radical, unstable changes that can overwhelm, I stay grounded in my heart, knowing that the great mother who birthed us has us in her loving arms. Something like that, right? Whatever language will light you up. Taurus invented the earth herself, so we are literally on Thursday, maybe not literally, but we are in the arms of the mother, right? If Taurus invented the earth is our mother. Mm-hmm. Venus is the consciousness that love leads. Now, July 4th might be interesting to say the least, partly because it's July 4th in the United States.
That is coming up.
I don't talk about holidays. I don't say Merry Christmas, and I'm not saying July 4th as a happy Independence Day, kids.
I'm assuming an interesting marker.
Well, here's what's, thank God it's not exactly a horrible day with, difficult transits that mean the world's going to end, because America as the center of the world and everything that is challenging here ripples out and impacts all of us. Independence Day this year will reflect an outward expression of all of this inward held, conflict.
I really could see it being a tense day, being a weird day.
You don't need an astrologer to tell you that that's true.
Right.
But the fact that Venus gathers with Uranus in Taurus the day before, and then before we even get a chance to celebrate for those who will, the heart center moves into the air sign of Gemini. Now, on a personal level, that could make your 4th of July celebrations really chatty and social and fun and talky and flirty and yummy because Venus loves it in Gemini. So, on a personal level, expect love in a kind of integrated and downloaded way on Thursday, and then a kind of refreshing excitement in the heart starting on Friday, and 3.5 weeks of our emotional body being more understood by us intellectually. That's another value of Venus in Gemini. While we're moving through, a rock'em sock'em month, Venus in Mercury sign of Gemini does allow us to understand our emotional life with a little bit more intellectual precision. So another reason why I'm telling you about Venus moving into Gemini for the July 4th celebration has to do with the chart for the USA. Both Uranus and Mars were in Gemini at the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Now, and again, I will talk about this in depth on Thursday, but the idea that every 80 years we are at war is a Uranus consciousness.
Huh.
Right? Well, we were forged in war. Our national anthem celebrates the explosions of the bombs.
Right.
Doesn't mention the blood, just the bombs.
Yeah.
Right? Every 80 years, Uranus returns to Gemini, and the first time it returned was Civil War. Second time, World War, 1 and 2, really. And now we're at war again, and the Uranus return of the United States, which happens in 2026, is part of why we're sort of blowing up here in the States. Because Mars is in Gemini in the USA, that's us. Mars is the body, so Mars in Gemini is the population of the United States. Isn't that elegant that our population is in the one sign where two sides can be equally vocal?
Mm-hmm.
So that tells our story, and Uranus moving through Gemini and having Mars there does impact the population of the United States in a very big way over the next 2 years, and Venus moving into Gemini on July 4th hints to our heart centers of the instability to come. Let me also remind you that I believe in us. I believe in our resilience. I believe in the idea that this is what is supposed to be happening right now. And that if we transmute the United States in the way that I think it's being asked for, I don't know how long this will take, kids, but we will create a new version of both the U.S. and the world order. And here we are. We got to start in the fires, and we got this. Now we're going to go backwards chronologically because I tend to go in order, but today I started with the juicier thing of the week with Venus and Uranus. And today there's actually something really important of note, which is Mercury starts his retrograde cycle at 4 degrees of Leo today. Mercury's going to be in Leo the entire summer because this is where his next retrograde will take place. He's only moved 4 degrees in, but that's the point to which he will come back to from mid-July to early August. So we're in the prep mode. We're in the pay attention to everything between now and the 17th, because things that rise up in your communication or perception, stuff, your mind, your thoughts, your writing, your expression, by mid-July, we'll know what to expect in the retrograde section because you've paid attention. I also think it's interesting that Mercury will stay in Leo for a protracted amount of time while we go through this first, what's called a grand sextile with the outer planets, starting with Uranus moving into Gemini, that our minds and our perception is in a sun-centered sign where we put ourselves at the front of our expression, that we are bold in our voices, because that's going to be necessary for us to get through the summer. And I like the idea that we are empowered with a voice and a mind and an expression that has some fire, Even the fixed fire notion of Mercury in Leo, I don't mind, even if it causes bigger bumps out there, because we don't get anywhere without activation. We don't transform through this without a little bit of, scorched earth. So,
Yeah.
me likey this placement of Mercury, though it'll have people sort of stubborn in their opinions. Fixed fire means I got a big opinion and I'm not movable with it. So even though that brings a dicey color to the summer, it's for our benefit. Just remember that the purpose of a retrograde of Mercury in Leo is to empower your voice, to center yourself more strongly, so that you can find the leadership that's inside of you and have it enter your voice. Mercury will get to 15 degrees of Leo next month and then backtrack back to 4. So wherever Leo is featured in your chart, including the Leo house, will be lit up with your sort of mind process. And so don't forget that the house in your chart where Mercury is moving might not be your Leo house. In other words, the retrograde may feature in one house while the house next to it is ruled by Leo. You have to include both the interpretation of where Mercury is transiting from, and if the next house in your chart is ruled by Leo, that house will also be activated in sort of, mind and thought. Well, now I'm going to talk about something that I never talk about. I'm going to talk about an outer planet retrograde cycle. So actually, this is instructive, I think, for those of you who have been following me long enough and know that I don't talk about the outer planets going retrograde. I don't think they make a difference in our experience. I think it's something that is written in a book that sort of says it's different, and it is. I'm not saying that retrogrades aren't a thing, but when you're talking about the outer planets that are holding consciousness of our bigger, higher selves, who gives a shit if the planet goes retrograde? It's when the personal planets go retrograde, they're visiting our unconscious. It's really important to pay attention to, because the difference is not only dramatic, but it's also purposeful. We don't integrate our spirituality any greater because Neptune goes retrograde, but there will be an inward quality as opposed to the outward quality of his direct motion. Now, what does that even mean? I challenge any of you to really feel the difference, but I'm sharing it with you because it is part of the mechanism of this important time. That Neptune going within in the sign of Aries will light us up from inside more than outside. So when Neptune first entered Aries, if y'all remember, the day that happened was the day that Cory Booker held a 24-hour filibuster. I share that with you. There's only one occurrence on the planet, but it's evidence of the shift of the planet of ideologies moving into the fiery cardinal sign of Aries that starts things up. Now it's an inside job for the next couple of months. Starting on Friday, Neptune will turn around and go into our insides, spending some time between now and the third week in October in the fiery mansion, but internally. Certainly, your spiritual practice and your connection to inspiration for your creative outlets will become more internalized, but fiery, right? Which is great. One of the things I talked about Neptune moving into Aries we would benefit from is our creativity is inspired by Neptune. And in Pisces, even though that's the sign of his rulership, there might have been a lot of passivity or laissez-faire or no motivation to push your creativity out into the world differently. But Neptune in Aries absolutely does that. Cardinal fire. We get moving with what inspires us from the inside. Then in the third week of October, Neptune will drop back into Pisces as will Saturn later, as will Uranus back into Taurus. Like we're gonna push out into fire this summer and retract. And Neptune has the match, right? Neptune's in the fire sign. So by him turning around this week, we have through the third week in October, then there's a revisit to Neptune in Pisces. Now that's our time to really recharge the spiritual connection we will need for the times ahead. And that'll benefit us. And I'm getting a little ahead of myself because we'll talk about that in October. And then he turns around and goes direct in early December. And when we get to the end of January 2026, that's it. There's no more visit of Neptune back into Pisces. He's going to move into Aries in February. Neptune and Aries will have an exact conjunction on the world axis point of 0 Aries. That could be an alarming time, but I'm way ahead of myself. But the reason why this is important is, please, kids, understand there's an energy coming next year that's going to require more of us than is being demanded now. And if that overwhelms you, I get it, but life is what it is. And so use this backward time of Neptune to recharge how you connect with the energy that's going to support us through everything, which is the power greater than yourself that you connect to in any way that you do. I've been saying for the last 9 months that only our spiritual practice will get us through life when the North Node is in Pisces, asking us to put spirit first. The planet of spirit going backwards is going to benefit us, and it starts on Friday. Now, I will talk about this at the top of next week's podcast because that's the week that Uranus changes signs, so I'll go more in depth. But there's something kind of yummy that happens on Sunday with our hearts that I think will make the shocking energy change shift from Uranus going into Gemini a little bit easier, and harkens back to that mantra I talked about, that though things get unstable, there's a sense of I've got my groundedness in my heart connected to spirit, because Venus will sextile both Saturn and Neptune on Sunday. Now, I normally wouldn't talk about such a fast-passing transit like this, but remember, Venus has been through a retrograde, so our hearts are sort of more open than ever. And having Venus pave the way by entering Gemini first, and then looking over at Saturn, the teacher, in productive geometry over the weekend, we get the message of there's a lot to do, there's a responsibility to do it, but I will give you the strength and fortitude you need. Thank you, Saturn. And the sextile with Neptune is, my heart is more full when I know the love of the divine. My loves are greater when I know that the world is my beloved before any human steps into that role. Like, that's the value of Neptune interacting with Venus for a moment on Sunday. So there's a beautiful, heartfelt preparation on Sunday, and then Monday, the change happens. And watch the news next week, because I bet you we're going to see some sudden and unexpected stuff to fly around a little bit. We'll do this together, kids, and have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have an email and dream from Leah. And I think this is interesting because it's a dream from 2021.
Ooh.
2021, yeah. And
Back
so
when
she
we were
says,
just sort of re-entering.
and she says, I had this dream on my birthday
Ooh.
in 2021, and I've kept the written record in my journal, but have never interpreted it for some reason. The dream. I'm at a water's edge. There are 2 dogs playing around. I'm throwing dog treats into the water, and the dogs are jumping in after them. A man comes. He's holding a cat. The cat licks my closed eyes like she was cleaning them for me. I opened my eyes and laughed, then ran down a log and jumped into the water. I started to sink. My legs and arms wouldn't do anything. I thought the man would jump in and save me when I didn't surface quickly enough. He did not, and I kept sinking. I reached the bottom. It looked like a cement culvert, but it was rusty. Nothing down there except cement, water, and rust. I looked up at the surface. Finally, I could swim. My lungs didn't have any more air to expel. So I pulled out a vape pen, hoping that pushing the button would create a disturbance at the surface of the water and catch the man's attention. Nothing happened. I was swimming faster. I wasn't afraid. I surfaced and went to my mother's house. I knew it was her house. It just looked like somewhere I'd been before. My brother's wife woke up and used all of the bread to make lunches for her kids. I was angry. My mom brought us all 4 packs of sparkly nail polish. I was mad because she spent money on something that isn't useful. I grabbed her arms and told her to stop wasting money on me. She's not happy. I told her to direct her energy to the lady using all the bread. When my brother came home from work, he and his wife were throwing a trans birthday party for one of their kids. The pizza came. My brother and sister were eating the only pizza and eating the best pieces. My sister left, and I grabbed my older brother, who happens to be smaller than me in the dream, turned him upside down, and started to smash his head against some furniture.
Oh my goodness.
He went limp. I propped him up on a couch so it looked like he was sleeping, and maybe he wouldn't remember when he woke up. He was wearing a mask. I looked close, and his eyes were like eggs, with the yolk broken. They were moving, and slowly a clear liquid filled the sack his eyes were in. I left and met a young adult in a grungy park. Thank you, Leah.
Oh my.
So,
lot of details, long dream. Let's see.
it gets like kind of random, but I feel
what drew
like
you? What drew you to picking this?
well, I love dogs and cats, whatever. So I thought
Okay,
I thought that was
that
funny.
counts.
But I don't know. I thought it was interesting about her being in the water and there being rust and cement, and
Yeah.
then like wanting to she's like, is someone gonna save me?
Right.
No.
And it is. It's about love and being saved and what that means. You know, what are the old sort of family habits about all of this? It's
Right,
all in there. So let's.
Because the second half, when it gets super random, I feel like she's also like feeling not considered.
And it is a family interaction and a
Yeah.
dynamic, right? Because brothers-in-laws or people show up in that second part of the dream, and there really is a kind of split between nurturance, sustenance, and care, the bread, or the presentational self, the sparkly nail polish, right? So there is a family dynamic that's old, culverts that have rust, that needs to be visited. So let's start at the top and inch
I
our
knew
way
they were
through.
related, and you just like verbalized that way better than I could have imagined.
Oh, I love it.
I was like, I know there's like a relationship in the emotions there.
Absolutely. Well, you're
Go
learning
for it. Go
because
for it.
you know we jump into the water's edge to explore our emotional consciousness, right? If
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
the
yeah.
water's edge, that even there tells us that Leah is in her conscious awareness, but right near some emotional experience that we know she has to,
Mhm.
she gets tossed in. She has to address. So that's the theme. And because there are two dogs playing and she's sort of treating them, right? They jump in. So, what I love about this scene is as she's exploring her current relationship with joy and love and sort of feeding those things, giving a dog a treat in a dream where the symbol of dog is unconditional love. Treat is to say, I value you enough to make you happy. By giving a treat, that's like the current landscape. Like Leah, the day before her birthday, was playing with dog treats and dogs at the water's edge. But it's a birthday dream, right? So it's a deep consideration of who she is, solar return. Who is Leah at this moment in 2021? And we add the fact that 2021 would be the birthday of the new world was created in the download of the virus, that 2021 was when we were like emerging. And I think this dream has something to do with that. That the
Yeah.
first moment of the dream is all's been well, but now I gotta go into an exploration where we start with the masculine principle of unconditional love, and then this man comes in with the feminine principle of unconditional love. I don't know exactly what we're going to do with that, but this man represents something interesting. I would call it a savior complex inside of Leah, right? First of all, he's a man. He's not a person in her life. So he doesn't represent an aspect of herself that, like, her friend Frank would represent if she was dreaming of her friend Frank. So a man means it's kind of a contrasexual or contragendered archetype that is designed to help her integrate. I mean, I'm making a lot of assumptions about her gender here, but Leah, I'm going to go with female. So there's something about dog love that Leah owns and something about cat love that she doesn't. But even as I'm saying that, cats are ferociously independent and don't seem to need. And I'm wondering if there's something in Leah's experience that not needing help is a coping mechanism. Right? It's a standard one if you come from,
Right.
a world where you didn't get needs met in the childhood home because everything was capitulating to parental needs. There can be sort of a quality of interdependence and, and self-sufficiency that's really a traumatic response. Sometimes when I'm interpreting a dream, I'd be like, I'm certain of this. Where here I'm like just presenting the possibility, right? See where we go as we keep going, because there's something that this cat wants Leah to see, right? She needs to open her eyes to some more reserved expression of love. Cats wait before they move or act or trust someone. Dogs tend not to, right? Dogs are impulsive. Cats are thoughtful. So there's something about a feminine quality that has some patience and self-sufficiency that Leah's psyche is asking her to open her eyes and see more clearly. She even laughs when it happens, right? So that tells me that process is also already begun. Because she laughs, that's to me, that's an indication of her receiving the message. So when she gets the message from the cat, right? So we've established she got the dog love. Now she's open to cat love. masculine and feminine principle integrated. She's now ready to take the dive. Right? So she runs down the log. That's like going from, structure into emotional surrender.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is scene one, right? Because it shows us what she's up to, where she is in her psyche, which is really near the emotional unconscious, and ready to jump in. Act one, she jumps. Here's where we get to the juicy juice part of the dream, right? Because she expects to, have some luminous swimming experience, but she sinks. That to me suggests there's a real demand to surrender to whatever emotional processing was going on back in 2021. And you got to go all the way to the bottom. And she does, right? She reaches the bottom. So that also implies that the surrender that I'm talking about is also something that she's ready for back in 2021 because she does, in fact, get to the bottom. But it is interesting that in that process, she has to first go through this, oh, shit, my arms and legs aren't moving. And arms are about creating things and making things happen. And legs are about moving through life and knowing what direction we're in. So this surrender is not a moment of action, but a moment to see what's in the deep psyche below that might be a little scary. So we've already had the thought that the man will save her. So as she's in the emotional process of allowing herself to be in touch with scarier and scarier places in her psyche, there's a fantasy that she won't have to do this, right? She won't have to, that something will happen that'll rescue her. That'll be like, oh, that'll tell me what to do, but that ain't gonna happen. The man is doing the appropriate thing of letting her be in the surrender and in the bottom because that's where she's gonna discover something. And what she discovers is it's a culvert. What's a culvert? Well, a culvert is like a tunnel. It's a tunnel for water to flow away from or out of sight of or interference with a road or a train track or, it's designed to control water, at an epic scale, right? Out in the world. But it's rusty. That implies age and sort of lack of attention. Things rust because no one's there to clean the rust off as it develops. So that speaks to me of family history. If we're in the deepest psyche of someone, that is to the bottom of the water, that's the farthest she can go. And what she gets is a control of emotion symbol. Culverts controlling water is like old ideas that are rusted out, but they're still there, trying to control the flow of emotion when what we want is more freedom, spontaneity, and a willingness to have darker emotions come up. And where I go with that, it's why I say allowing darker stuff to come up, because in the moment when she's unable to breathe and needs a solution for that, she goes into an escapism symbol as opposed to a bona fide solution symbol. Like she can't breathe, so what does she do? She pulls out a vape pen. So right there is an escapism symbol. That vape pen represents a kind of addictive, like I'm going to turn to this thing to help. And what does she do with it? She tries to signal the guy, again, sort of relinquishing responsibility, saying, oh, I want to be rescued from this. And I might even be willing to rescue myself through escapism, because that's what she's hoping. She's hoping to pull out the vape pen and get saved. The fact that she doesn't leads to her not being afraid. So that's yet another indication that Leah's doing good. The dream narrative is taking us to different places of resistance and then showing us her pushing past the resistance. Because once she starts swimming, not afraid, that's when she surfaces. And then we know that the dive is over. What's the plum that Jack Horner pulled out of? That's aging me. That's a nursery rhyme of someone made a pie and Jack Horner pulled out the plum. Sorry, I'm 61. it's the nugget that she pulls out from her deep unconscious is mother issues and family, right? Brother's wife
Okay.
is there. And now we've got the sparkly nail polish, another escapism symbol,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Nail polish is like a barrier to authenticity. Not a bad thing, like it represents the desire to adorn, but this isn't an adorned dream. This is a dream to
Right.
get dirty and wet. And she's like, well, what about the sparkly nail polish? So yet another symbol that says that Leah's doing well in this transformation. She comes to the awareness that there's a waste of money. I even wrote that. I take notes because I'm old. And I wrote, stop wasting money in all caps, right? That seemed like a big piece of info. And that tells us that as Leah's facing her birthday dream, we're seeing that she's actually learning through the dream what to value. And what to value is much more about authenticity and real sustenance. There's a lady using all the bread. That's a judgmental phrase right there. Right?
And
The
all the
way
pizza.
Leah described it as if to say, oh my God, all the bread will be used. That's bad. Except that I think the dream symbol of that isn't a waste or a misuse of the bread, but a sense that bread is what's necessary. So now we might be looking at where was the sustenance at home in the family dynamic? Brother and sister eating the best pieces. So that might be informative to something about the family dynamic is who got what and where's mine. And then the rage to the little brother. I don't know that the brother and sister who eat the best pieces are older than Leah, but I'm having a fantasy that they are and that like they're getting all the good stuff and the rage is passed on to the younger, which happens in families and group dynamics, right? There's this sort of pecking order. And then the smashing of the little brother's head. Now I wish she were here.
Yeah, that's a pretty big one.
Well, it certainly seems like a rageful act about thoughts or ideas. You know, the younger brother's head also means ways that the younger brother thinks about life, as well as this idea that rage gets passed down. I'm more interested in the idea of the head as a symbol of ideas and thought, the brother as a kind of construct of thought because he exists and, Leah knows how he thinks, what he thinks. And though the smashing of the head seems violent, and I have to take that in, that there's a need to change thought in a violent way, and maybe it's connected to something that the little brother actually has in his worldview because the yoke, right? There's an implication that there's sustenance there. Like yolk, egg is the nutritious part of the egg.
Sure.
Now we get to, well, the yolk is broken and there's a grungy guy in the park. Right now we have some symbols at the very end of the dream of what the work is, what the attention needs to be put on. And for me, it's understanding why the little brother, Leah, why the smashing of the head. Was it about eradicating that part of you, or was it about cracking it open and finding the yolk, and maybe you just smashed it a little too hard and the yolk broke, leading to the grungy man in the park who clearly needs a little taming, maybe a shower or some kind of a nurturing. The man in the park might be some version of the man in the dream in form now as the guy in the park, but grungy, not quite sort of palatable, suggests that, at least in 2021, there was some work for Leah to do. And for my money, it's in those last few scenes.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.